the MS Michigan Man 64 podcast. My name is Brian Wallace, and I am the MS Michigan Man 64. The MS Michigan Man 64 podcast is about chronic disease awareness. I have had multiple sclerosis for the last 27 years. It's an invisible chronic disease that I've been battling for half of my life. I want to share with you what it is like living with the chronic disease from my experiences and the experiences of other chronic disease warriors. We can fight to have a voice to those that want to listen. Together, we can motivate and educate. Hi, welcome back to the MS Michigan Man 64 podcast. Today, I am sitting with a MSer from the state of Michigan. Go Blue. I met Amariel a couple weeks ago on social media. She got a hold of me and she wanted to come on and talk about her journey with her MS diagnosis in 2021. Please welcome to the podcast, Amariel. How are you doing today, Amariel?
I'm good, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing all right. I'm having a decent day. It's kind of hot here in Ohio, but it is a good day.
Good. I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah. So, Marielle, you got diagnosed with your MS in 2021. Can you kind of take us through your journey? Like what kind of symptoms you were experiencing that led up to your diagnosis?
Of course. Well, I want to say I knew that I had it for quite a while before I actually got my diagnosis. Round about 2010, I started having issues with my legs, and they would just kind of randomly give out on me. Um, and it didn't happen very often, but it started happening more frequently. So of course I went to the doctor and slew of testing, and they would come back and, oh, it's this, oh, it's that. It wasn't ever anything that made sense. So finally in 2015, I had been out on the lake that day doing some fishing, um, was getting driven home, which is a really good thing I didn't drive myself home. I ended up getting to a point I hadn't felt good all day. My legs decided to get that real strong buzzing sensation going on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember anything until waking up, locked into a fist fight in the back of an ambulance outside my house, because I didn't know where my son was. And he was inside and he was safe and fine. Turns out that I had blacked out, lost consciousness, and quit breathing twice.
Nice.
They took me, yeah. They took me to the hospital. I was in the hospital for a couple weeks. They were pumping me full of steroids, antibiotics. They were running a bunch of tests, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. And I said, this has been going on off and on for the last 5 years. Are there any other tests we can do? Do you guys think maybe it would be multiple sclerosis? Well, they kind of laughed at that. And they said, well, you're not old enough to have MS. Okay, I wasn't aware that MS had an age range, but all right. So it literally took me another 6 or 7 years after that to finally officially get my diagnosis.
So how old were you at this time when you first started having these symptoms, Marielle?
I want to say when I very first started having those symptoms, I was 12 years old.
And when you were going to doctors, I mean, they wouldn't even consider MS because it wasn't a juvenile disease. Is that what your mom and dad were being told?
Yeah. And whenever it got brought up, they would kind of just laugh it off. And, they gave me numerous different reasons of why it couldn't be MS. And the biggest one that they most seemed to be stuck on was the fact that I didn't have visible brain lesions. Once we finally were able to get them to start doing MRIs, that was a fight and a half. And so that ended up being the sole reason that they said no. Well, the last specialist I went to, a neurologist, before I got my diagnosis, this was, 2018, I believe, 2017. And they ended up doing an MRI at that time, and there were changes in my brain. But between that and the spinal tap, I literally was chasing this neurologist around the office looking for an answer because all he would tell me, well, your spinal tap and your brain MRI were done in the wrong order, so it can't possibly be MS. I knew in that moment that that guy was full of it.
I don't even understand the logic in that. What does it matter the order of the test, whether or not it's MS or not? That doesn't even make sense to
Right. And that was exactly my first question. I said, why does it matter? And according to him, he just kind of threw out some, BS about, well, this test can affect this test. Well, how can a spinal tap have an effect on a brain MRI? And at that point, he had kind of gone behind closed doors and wouldn't speak to me anymore.
so.
So they canceled all my appointments going forward, and I never saw him again.
And in the meantime, you're still not diagnosed, and you still have no idea what's going on, and you're still going through life with all these symptoms.
Yeah. And the hardest thing back then, was my legs and them giving out on me. I mean, it was extremely difficult for me to hang on to employment during that time. And, I was a construction worker for almost 20 years, and you can't be on a job site and just have your legs go out from underneath you.
Yeah,
So then after that happened, I started hearing um, that it was conversion disorder. Have you ever heard of that?
I have not. No, what is that?
So, conversion disorder is basically where your stress levels are high enough to the point that it can um, affect your extremities, your arms, your legs, your speech. And they ended up giving me that diagnosis. And so, for about three, 3.5 years, they just said, well, you just have to get your stress levels down.
Wow.
Yeah, that didn't make any sense to me. And the minute that that doctor told me that, I looked right at him and I said, "You're full of you know what."
So let me ask you this, Amariel. How much of this do you think is that you were female and you were going to these doctors and they're sitting here just telling you that it's in your head and it's a stress thing?
Well, I'm not even gonna lie. I was very angry and very upset.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've run into a lot of that, not just with the MS, but with other medical conditions that I have. I mean, I still have doctors to this day that tell me, oh, it's you can't possibly have that because you're too young.
Yeah.
And then testing comes back and it turns out that it's there. And I had already been going through that before I got my MS diagnosis. And that was the only thing to me that made sense.
Yeah.
So very frustrating to say the least.
Yeah, this journey, just to get a diagnosis sometimes it takes years, and it doesn't make sense to me. I was very fortunate, I guess. It took me 10 months, and I thought that was forever. But I hear these stories about people that it takes, a, a year, 2 years, 5 years, sometimes 10 years. I just don't understand it. I don't, I would love to have a doctor explain to me how they can look at an MRI and one neurologist can see lesions on that MRI, and the other doctor doesn't see lesions and he doesn't diagnose. And because that happened to me, it was the same MRI. And one neurologist looked at it and he wouldn't diagnose me with MS. And I walked away from him. 10 months later, I go back to the same hospital. And a different neurologist looks at the same MRI and he goes, "Oh, yeah, you got MS, Brian." Okay, why was it easy for that doctor to see it and not the other one? I don't understand that.
I don't either. And honestly too, I mean, whenever I get any kind of testing done, I never really bothered too much with radiologist reports because I mean, they're basically paid to look at these things and say, yeah, we see this on here, or no, we don't.
Hmm.
And, a radiologist is not a doctor. And in my experience with what I've been through, there are a lot of doctors out there that do care, but there's also a lot that don't.
Yeah. I mean,
And I
it's sad to say that. I mean, I can't argue with that. I mean, I think that for the most part, doctors they're very intelligent human beings. I'll give them that. But there are doctors that are money driven and they're in that field just for the money because it does pay well. And they don't really They're not there for the patient care. I see that with doctors a lot.
Yes, and I always struggled with that. Even now, I still struggle with it, and I'm sure a lot of people in the MS community can, relate to, stigma with the MS with a lot of different, medical professionals because, it's always, well, you're too young for this, or you have all these other signs, but you don't have this one specific one, so it can't possibly be that.
Hmm.
And they leave people with more questions than answers.
Yeah.
And that has been my experience, over the past, say, 25 years. And, you go into hospitals and stuff and, hey, I'm here because I need help. And I've been labeled a drug seeker more times than I can even count.
Yeah, I hear that a lot too. And I've never had that issue because I don't take any kind of narcotics, but I've said like to doctors, that I have pain and all that, and the first thing out of their mouth, well, I'm not prescribing you drugs, and I look at them and be like, well, I didn't ask you for drugs. I go, I'm just telling you that I have
Right.
pain. I mean, it's like doctors they think that you're a pill chaser sometimes, but no, you are in pain, and they ask you your pain level, and I always say my pain level is a 7. Well, that's pretty high. Well, yeah, well, I mean, you should see my 10. I mean, seven's pretty. That's a pretty good day for me. But I mean, I'm in constant pain, neuropathy. I've got 4 back surgeries. I mean, I'm in pain. But
Yeah.
doctors think I'm looking for pills. No, I'm not. I'm just telling you, I'm in pain.
Yeah. I've been through that more times than I care to even think about, honestly. And, when it comes to the pain scale, especially for people that have autoimmune disorders and chronic pain, there should be a completely different pain scale for people that are going through what we're going through because our pain is different than just the general range.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
A lot of people with MS and chronic pain conditions, a good day for them could be a 9 on a normal pain scale.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's like I say 7 because I just got tired of it. I mean, what are you going to do for me if I tell you a 10? I mean, you're not going to do anything for me anyway, so I'll just call it a 7.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yep, I've done the same thing, and it just absolutely infuriates me. I've gone off on my share of medical professionals, and because I've gotten the same thing. Like, well, I'm not going to give you pain pills.
yeah,
Do you see me sitting here asking you for pain pills? No, you asked me if I'm in pain, and I answered the question.
right, right. So
But I know with
I was going to ask
oh, go ahead.
so how did you end up with them telling you in 2021 that you had MS and you've been trying to get this diagnosis for so long?
The doctor that I found, she, I had gotten all my previous test results together. I had written down a list of what I had been going through since I was 12. It was a pretty significant file folder. And what I did was, I want to say 2 weeks before I was due to see her, I dropped that file off at her office. And, I told them, I said, can you please have her look over this? That way she has adequate time to review everything. And when I went to see her for the first time, we weren't in the room 5 minutes together. And she said, just in the first handful of pages, if even that much, she said, you have MS.
Wow. It was
And at that point, I kind of just laughed because what else could I do? It was either laugh or cry.
oh, I that it. mm. Did you have any kind of like I told you so kind of feeling in like because you've been going through this for so long and you've been battling for so long and then you finally get told, within pretty much minutes that you do have MS. I mean, were you like kind of like relieved? Yeah, I told you so. I'm not crazy. This isn't in my head. Well, yeah, really it is because I have lesions, but I mean, it was a real issue I was talking about.
Yeah, yeah. And I absolutely felt that way. And when I came home, I kind of just gave myself a couple of days to think everything over. But I mean, every single person that I talked to, well, why were these doctors saying that you didn't have it for all these years, but then you go see this doctor for 5 minutes and she knows that you had it? And something else that also threw a monkey wrench into that was during the struggle of trying to figure out what an accurate diagnosis would be. I ended up being told by the MS Association that 5% of the MS population does not have brain lesions. And that is one of the most prominent things that they look for in an MS diagnosis.
Hmm.
And it's crazy to me that the information for that is out there. And I was just appalled because in my head, I'm like, are these doctors even looking at this or are they just kind of ignoring it?
Right.
And a good example I could think to use would be uh, fibromyalgia. Even after, the research and everything with that that's been done, there are still so many doctors that don't even believe that that's a real thing.
Yeah. I've talked to so many people that have been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and they've had to fight for that diagnosis too, and it's crazy. It's just crazy.
Yeah, and that's another one that I have, and it was not quite as intense of a fight as it was with my MS, but it still took me over 10 years to get a diagnosis for that. And ironically enough, my diagnosis ended up coming from a sports medicine doctor.
Wow. Okay. It's kind of off the wall
And
there.
that also, yeah, and that was something else that also kind of complicated things for me because I had heard of fibromyalgia from a few people that I knew that had told me they were diagnosed with it, but I didn't really know anything about it. So I had to look into it. And of course, at this time, there wasn't hardly any research. It was just starting to really be talked about. And so for me, it was okay, what symptoms am I having that come from the fibromyalgia and what comes from the MS?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because my experiences with that, you walk into a hospital and they see, oh, you have fibromyalgia, or we're not going to give you drugs, so you might as well leave.
Oh yeah. Right. I mean,
I went,
from my understanding, there's not even really a treatment for fibromyalgia. It's all controlled by diet because there's no medication for it, right?
well, they do have some medications that they use for it, like nerve drugs. Gabapentin
Yeah.
is a big one.
Yeah.
Um, I have never been so sick in my life. I tried it. They also had some mood drugs that they were prescribing people for fibro. um, Tried those nerve drugs. If I know that there's people out there that it really helps them, and I'm happy for that. But at the same time, like gabapentin is one of the most toxic things that you can put in your body.
Yeah. I mean,
The stuff that they use to treat it isn't.
well,
It's not created for it.
well, and and that's the thing that anybody that has any kind of a chronic disease, whether it's fibro or MS or POTS or whatever, I mean, anything that we put into our bodies, you read the label on them, and it's terrible for us. It tears apart your kidney, it tears apart your liver. You got the risk of
Oh,
PML. I mean, but we're putting toxic stuff into our body just so we can survive another day.
yeah, and it's being marketed as being good for you.
Yeah,
But my client that I see now, he has tremendously opened up my eyes to how toxic the majority of our food is
yeah.
and how that has such a detrimental effect to people's health. And, I mean, I definitely feel that MS and fibro are the two big ones with that, that they just tell you, oh, you got to change your diet.
Yeah.
Okay, well, can you explain to me why it's more expensive to eat healthy than it is to eat crap?
Right.
I mean, it basically goes hand in hand with, it's like a big vicious circle because between the foods that we're eating and, the doctors who aren't in things for the right reasons and big pharma, hey, let's keep people sick and we'll keep making more money.
That's kind of the way that we feel a lot of times, especially the people that have been doing this for as long as we have. It's like people are getting rich off of our conditions. I mean, we're not getting any better,
Yeah.
but a lot of people are making a shit ton of money off of it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it sickens me because, the FDA, they're a part of this too. I mean, they're supposed to be in place to, protect us and keep us safe from chemicals and, stuff that we're not supposed to be ingesting. But yet all these fast food places popped up on the corner and all these bags of snacks and grocery stores. I mean, it really makes me curious how many people actually read ingredient labels on food.
It makes me wonder how much of that the chemicals that are put into our foods in our whole lifetime have given us a reason to have an autoimmune disease. Did it cause, did it cause fibro? Did it cause your MS? It's because you got that whole 4 or 5 year period of COVID. A lot of people's chronic condition popped up during COVID. Was it because of the vaccine? I mean, there's a lot of questions to all that stuff.
Oh, yeah. Well, and the problem with the COVID vaccine was because they did not take the time to do the proper testing. And so they were just trying to get it done and shove it out and start giving it to people. And now people are coming back with all these reports that they're worse off because they've had that
Hmm.
vaccination.
Yeah, yeah. I talked to people.
They need to be taking their time and testing these things and making sure that they are actually safe for us. Because at the end of the day, in my personal opinion, I don't trust a single word that the FDA says.
Yeah, I don't think any of us do really. So let me ask you
Yeah.
this, Mariel. When you got diagnosed in 21, how did you handle that diagnosis? Because I mean, you were thinking you had MS for so many years. How did you handle like the actual diagnosis? Okay, I'm officially diagnosed with MS. This is a chronic disease. It's never going away. How did you process that after you get diagnosed?
Well, to be honest, I was kind of like a ping pong ball for about a month. There was that overwhelming relief of, okay, I'm not crazy. This is what this actually is. So everything that I've been fighting for over a decade was not in vain. But then at the same time, I mean, there wasn't nearly the information out about MS as there is now.
Mm.
And, I had a physician look at me and tell me that I better get used to enjoying my life now because I'm going to end up in a wheelchair and that's pretty much going to be the end of it for me.
Yeah,
So I was terrified.
Yeah, you were telling me that yesterday when we were talking, and I just my jaw just dropped. I can't believe a doctor actually told you that. I can't even imagine what I would have said to a doctor had a doctor told me that I would have been in a wheelchair and try to start planning for that. I would have freaked out on him.
Oh, I definitely did. And what I said to that particular doctor is not something that's podcast material, but
Yeah.
yeah, I told him what I thought. So and honestly, at first, it just kind of made me feel worse for about a week. And then, because of course, then internally, I'm asking myself, is that true? Is this what my life is going to boil down to? But I mean, people come back from cancer all the time,
Hmm.
and I feel like as long as they're diligently doing the work that they need to be doing as far as, investigating and testing and things like that, eventually they can help us find a cure.
Yeah. I mean, I think the cure is going to happen. I don't know if I'm going to benefit from it because I've had it for 27 years, and I just think that there's just been so much damage that I'm not gonna like, have some miracle drug come out and I'm gonna be walking normal again. But
Yeah.
I do think the younger generation that are just getting diagnosed now, I think that they're gonna see it in their lifetime. And I think it's gonna be a great thing. I'm looking for I hopefully I live to see the cure. Because it's gonna be a great thing.
Yeah. And that's what I'm hoping for too, because, I mean, I think that what I went through was rough, but I mean, there were how many thousands of people or hundreds of thousands of people before my generation that went through this and they didn't even know what MS was,
Hmm.
and having to watch people suffer unnecessarily because of that, I don't handle that very well.
Yeah. Amen. I've you see and you read and you hear the stories about how it was before the DMTs, and they were just basically treating your symptoms with steroids. I've had a couple of people on that have had this disease since the 80s, and that was their first treatment. They were getting just jacked up with
Yeah.
salumedrol, and I just couldn't imagine, we've come such a long way. Just since I was diagnosed, 97, there were 3 DMTs. I think there's about 26 of them now, 25, 26 of them. I wish there was one of them that it was actually a cure, but I mean, they're making more DMTs, which I think is a good thing. Because when there were 3 of them, if you failed on all 3 of them, you were screwed. So at least now there's more options
Yeah.
and more choices.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, which I think is a really good thing, but, ever since I had that particularly nasty relapse in 2015, every time that I would go to the hospital when this would happen, it was always the same thing. We're going to give you the steroid in your IV. And I mean, they would do this daily. And they would give me so many fluids that my feet and my hands looked like sausages.
Mm,
And I finally got to a point where I said, there is nothing that they are going to do for me in a hospital when I relapse that I can't do for myself. So that's what I started doing once I acquired all the medical equipment that I need for my relapses. I quit going when it happens. I mean, I'll call my doctor and let her know what's going on and, go in and see her. But, outside of that, I don't want to be pumped full of steroids.
yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of people out there that do not have good reactions to steroids.
Oh yeah, I know. I mean, I don't like the feeling of them. I mean, I don't have any kind of allergic reactions to the Solumadrol. I get the metallic taste in my mouth. It makes me not be able to sleep. But I don't have some of the side effects that I've heard people have. I mean, yeah, some of those some people get tore up by these steroids.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And they put me in a bad mood. I don't like how I feel on them. I feel funny. I find myself angry over nothing. It's too many negative side effects for me to want to continue that. And that's another reason why I never got started with any of the infusions or anything, because I mean, I've heard the horror stories from, we were talking about my buddy Adam that, he was getting these every 6 months. And 3 months before he was due to get his next one, it would wear off and he would spend 3 months in withdrawal. I mean, and that's not even considered a controlled substance. And that was just mind blowing to me that in my mind, I'm like, how are you going to make someone who is sick with an autoimmune disorder live like that as if having MS isn't hard enough on its own?
Yeah.
It was just mind blowing to
It
me.
yeah, I totally understand what you're talking about, and that's why I tell everybody that this is such an individualized journey for everybody, because sometimes the DMT route works for people, and they live a great life. I talked to somebody last week that she's had it for 17 years, and she's only been on one DMT. It's been Avonex, and she's been great on it. And I know other people that have been on 7 DMTs and their MS has gotten terrible. It's just such an
Yeah.
individual path, uh, but you can't give up. I mean, if the DMTs are taking you out, you can't just say, I'm just going to give up and let MS just control you. You gotta figure out another way to fight it, and that's kind of what you did. I mean, you just said, screw the DMTs. I'm not going to do it that way, and you figured out your way of battling this disease.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it did get even worse for me at one point that to this day I still don't have an answer if it was, the MS or not, but I had a seizure, a pretty nasty one. And so for exactly 7 days, the people that I lived with at that time, they had told me, you were a completely different person. You didn't know who your friends were. You only knew a couple of people in your family, and so apparently I'd gotten taken to the hospital a couple times, and the resounding answer that we were getting from them was, well, this started happening because you've had this MS for so long and it's been untreated. And so for about a year, year and a half after that, I had, I don't want to say continual, but I had occasional seizures. And when they would start to hit, it would feel like I was going into a relapse because I would fall down, I'd be dizzy, my legs would feel really weak.
Mhm.
But then once that cleared, I was totally fine.
And you kind of learned that pattern after time.
Yes. Yeah. I kind of just started making notes and writing things down like when this happens, this is what happened. But, honestly, after that year and a half, I haven't had a seizure since then.
So
And that's another one that I can't get answered.
yeah, yeah. You're not going to get an answer, but it's just crazy that, like I said, everybody has their own path. So what do you what do you do, like a lot of the supplements or any kind of like the diet change, or you just live life and you just keep going the way you want to go?
I mean, honestly, at this point, I kind of have just been living my life and just kind of readjusting things for when the relapses happen.
Hmm.
Um, the I do have partial relapses at times. Um, the big ones, I can't walk, I can't stand, I can't feel anything from my hips down. But then there's times where it will only take out one leg. And that's something that I've always been curious if anybody else deals with that. So I'd be really curious to talk to anybody in the group that may have gone through something like that or similar.
Well,
But after my really bad,
I can tell you that most of my symptoms or my relapses, my episodes, they've been vision related and they've been left side related. It's been left leg. My left leg would I would catch my toe, my foot would drop. My left side is weaker. My left side is my nemesis. My left hip flexor is weak. So I think that there are a lot of MSers that I've talked to that they do have a weak side and a strong side with their MS. Just from everybody that I've talked to.
yeah. Well, and that's one thing that I was kind of trying to figure out because I mean, there's still not enough known about MS to know, exactly how it works and how it progresses. I mean, I was even reading one of the guys that was also on your show about trying to remember how he said it. That okay, there it went.
That's okay.
I can't remember what it was, but
That's okay. It'll come.
uh,
It'll come back to you in a couple of minutes. That's all that musters. It pops out of your head, pops back in your head. It'll come back.
yes, absolutely. But yeah, after I had another major relapse in 2018, and after that, I never regained full feeling in my left leg.
Okay.
My right leg feels normal, but I can only feel at the most maybe 30% of my left leg from my hip to my foot.
Okay.
I actually had somebody accidentally drop a hitch on my left foot after that, and I didn't feel it.
Yeah. I am.
Busted up my foot pretty good, but I didn't feel it.
I can say the same thing. I've already had cuts in my left leg. My wife will be like, "Hey, your leg's bleeding." I'm like, "It is." And she's like, "Yeah, you didn't feel that?" I'm like, "Nope, I didn't feel it." I mean, my left leg's numb too. I totally understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the weird thing is because early 2021, when I would have the partial relapses, sometimes it was my left leg, other times it was my right leg. But ever since then, now when my partial relapses hit, it's only my left leg. But of course, that always causes problems too, because even though you still have one leg that's functional, I mean, you're having to readjust how you do everything.
yeah, it affects your gait. That's why my hip. That's why my left hip is all whacked out because 27 years of walking with a little hitch in my giddy up. It's affected my hip, and uh,
Yeah.
and that's another thing that people just don't get. You got people that this affects your gait. You're going through drop foot. You're trying to adjust your knee, your hip, just to walk. And you do that for long periods of time, it deteriorates, your other joints, and it's a
Oh, yeah.
lifelong journey. That's why I tell people, from the day that you start this journey, it's a lifelong journey. You're gonna have little things that you're gonna notice that are just you're gonna be kind of crazy things happening to your body.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And, it was strange to me because a few months ago, I was crawling up into bed because my bed is kind of high. And I kind of have to, pull my right leg up, put it on the mattress, and then, get the rest of the way up. Well, I ended up tearing the tendon in my right hip.
Hmm.
And when I was talking to the doctor about it, she said, she said, I have a theory. She said, I don't know if we'll ever be able to prove it. She said, but I feel like after everything that you've been through with the relapses that you've had and the partial relapses, she said, I think it's gotten to the point where you're starting to wear out your right hip because you rely on it so heavily, especially during like a partial relapse.
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally understand that. I mean, it totally makes sense to me. It's logical to me. It's just a process. Your body's it's wearing down because
Oh, yeah.
overcompensating for the way you're walking and all that.
Yep.
Marielle,
Yep.
I got another question for you. I'm going to switch gears on it. Let's talk about how this disease has affected your relationships.
Absolutely. Well, that it definitely has made things a lot harder. It's very difficult to find people that want to try to understand something that they have no idea about it. There were times where, I date somebody for a while and they'd say, well, it can't be that bad. Like I can, try to help you out and I'll do some research and try to understand. But then I always noticed that when, like a full relapse or something would hit and it would get really bad, it was too much. So it all but put a halt on my dating life.
It, it's a journey, and I try to tell people that too. When we get that diagnosis of MS, and if you are married, your spouse has just been introduced to the diagnosis too, because they're going to have to live with that. And even if it's a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or a mom or a dad, I mean, it is a life changer for everybody involved in it. Anybody that
Absolutely.
anybody that wants to have any type of relationship with you, they got to be on board. And if they're not on board, then they can't be part of your life because you need to have people that support you.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, that's one of the biggest things that I found in my journey thus far is that it is so much easier when, the easiest thing would be being with someone who's also going through it because nobody's going to understand it better than someone else who's struggling with it. But I mean, it really got me to a point where I quit dating.
Mhm.
And, I had friends all the time, oh, let me set you up with so and so. And it's like, yeah, everything's all well and fine and great until a relapse hits. And then I'm just going to end up finding myself alone. And so I got to a point where, it's like, this isn't even worth it to do this anymore because I don't want to get attached and start growing feelings for someone just to have them turn around and say, this is too much. I can't handle it.
And that's the sad truth that happens so much with people with chronic disease. It's hard to find somebody that gets it. When I went through a divorce, I was with my first wife, 17 years, 15 married, and I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that MS was the reason we got divorced. Did it have some effect to it? Yeah, probably. But when I was out in the dating world, I mean, I didn't know. I thought I was going to be alone. I'm like, who wants damaged goods? I'm 42 years old and I have had a disease for 15, 16 years. Who the hell is going to want to date me? And it
Yeah.
was really hard. I mean, I actually had one female walk out on me on a date after I told her I had MS. She just said, not for me, and she walked out. People don't understand this disease, and I don't think they want to understand. And even if they try to understand, sometimes they get so scared of it, they run away.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I ended up divorced in 2019. We had been separated for a few years before our divorce was final, but um, I purposely tried to push him away, because I didn't want to get attached to another person just to have him walk away from me again. And he ended up staying. And so we got married. And after I had my youngest son in 2013, my body basically just imploded from the inside out. And all of these dormant health issues that hadn't come out previous to this, everything just hit at once. And so for the first 4 years of my son's life, I was in the hospital more than what I was at home.
Mm.
And, part of that in my mind was the MS, along with everything else. But, he got very critical of that, well, you don't know for sure that that's what's going on. But I mean, with the information that was out there, it really didn't take a genius to put two and two together. And that ultimately ended up being what led to our divorce because my health got so bad, he couldn't handle it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the
And that was a devastating blow.
Yeah, and I mean that is a blow to our mental health. I mean, like I said, when I went through my divorce, I knew that stress, that the stress of going through that divorce, I knew it was going to crush my MS. I knew it was going to have a bad effect on it because stress is a killer for me.
Yeah.
All my episodes have all been stress related, whether it was work, family, or friends or what. it had something to do with stress in my life that caused me to go into a flare.
Yes, stress is definitely a huge trigger for MS. Well, and you find yourself questioning yourself too, like, you know, did I really do things so bad that they don't think I'm worth it? And
Mhm,
you find yourself sitting there because I did that for over a year. And, after a while, it was just kind of like, all right, well, maybe I should talk to somebody about it. So, I went to therapy and I'm really glad that I did because it helped me tremendously.
mm,
And, I've since learned that this disease only will have that much control over my life if I let it.
mhm, yeah,
So for me, positive affirmations are an essential part of my mornings. You are worthy, you are good enough, especially when you're dealing with people, like you said, that don't understand because they can put a real damper on your mental health,
okay.
especially in situations like that.
Oh god, yeah. I mean, I've heard people being called lazy, just because, I mean, they're fatigued. They're not lazy, they're fatigued. You gotta understand the disease. And it's very frustrating when you got people that just they don't want to take the time to learn about it. I always tell people ignorance is a choice. You have a choice to remain ignorant on something, and I always try to learn as much as I can about everything that I can because I just want knowledge. I want, even though I might not be an expert at something, I want to have knowledge of something so I understand it.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel that way too. I mean, especially, what I do with my group, because ultimately, I want to bring positive change to the medical system because I'm sick and tired of seeing people suffer and how much I suffered and how much my mom suffered. And the one good thing I can say about social media is that at least certain ones have given us the platform where we can find each other.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I mean, there for several years, I mean, my support groups and stuff that I was a part of online, those were my people, because the majority of the friends that I had in real life, they just, you're always canceling at the last minute. You're always too tired. It's always something with you, and they would walk away too.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Talk a little bit about your group, Amariel. I know you just said a little bit about it, and I want you to talk a little bit more about it, and I'll put it in the episode description if any of you want to join her group.
Yeah, that would be amazing. So my group is called Corey's Corner. We are on YouTube and Facebook. The goal with my group is to try to bring positive change to the medical system because anybody that's been through anything health related knows just how screwed up our medical system is and how it's not working for those of us that are suffering. We do discussion videos, and I'm always open to taking ideas. So, if it's a specific medical condition or, anything medical related, we'll talk about it. Um, I like to bring people on with me from time to time to do certain videos talking about things, especially if it's something that someone has an experience with. And I don't know, if we'll see change in my lifetime, but I just want to help people. And that's a big part of the reason why I know as much about the medical system and different conditions as I do, because like you said, knowledge is power.
Hmm. Yeah, and
So we definitely.
I love what you're doing. I checked your Facebook page out, and I love it. I just think it's such an awesome thing. I mean, we're on the same mission. You're dealing with a chronic disease, and you want to spread awareness on what it's like living with this disease, and you just want to help people to understand it, just like I do. And I just really appreciate you and everything that you're about, Ariel. And if you had anything else that you would want to say to anybody that's out there listening that's in the same situation as you have been, what would your message be to them?
Well, I would say that my message would be, you know, don't give up. And one of the most important things to remember is nobody is going to be a better advocate for you than you, and it's okay to tell a doctor no. It's okay to not agree with diagnosis or something that they tell you that you don't feel is right. But for anybody with a support system, those people that that are there for you, lean on them, and don't shut people out because of what you're going through. And I know therapy is still kind of a taboo thing with people, but honestly, I still go. I see my therapist every week, and she's been a tremendous help to me. And for me, I would like to see people do things like that than to sit and suffer in silence
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I love,
because it doesn't matter.
yeah.
It doesn't matter what you're going through. What matters is that you help yourself so that you can continue to fight.
Yeah, and and if we can all just come together and support each other, I think that's just such an important thing. And that's why I love what you're doing, Amariel. You are just like me. You just want to help people. And if anybody wants to check out Corey's Corner, like I said, I'll have it in the description. It is really, really cool. I love the platform. She's just starting it out and she's just growing it. But I think it's going to do really well, Amariel. I think you're doing really good things. I love meeting you, and I would love to have you on again. You're always welcome to come back on and talk about
Awesome.
MS anytime you want.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian. And I can definitely say the same for you. Like when you had mentioned when we had talked before that, you had mentioned like, I'm just a guy with MS, nobody wants to hear my story, but I'm really glad that you took that first step and you came out and you put your story out there and you started doing these podcasts because, between my group and you doing this, it's things like this that give people the hope to continue.
Yeah, no, and I say we all just need to come together and let our stories be heard because it's the only way people are going to understand what it's like.
Yeah.
And that's why I can't do this by myself. I need people just like you. I need people that want to talk about their journey to explain it. I tell people 27 years I've had this disease, and every time I have somebody on and I start talking to them, I learn something new. I mean, you get
Yeah.
that's how different this disease is. And you just all you have to do is listen to us. Just listen to what we say.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really do feel like people putting their stories out there, I mean, I know it can be a little intimidating, but, ultimately, at least from personal experience, if I can put my story out there and it only just helps one person, then it's worth it to me.
Absolutely, I say the same thing. All right,
Yep.
if you want to follow Amriel on her Facebook page, I will put that in the description. If you want to follow me on my TikTok, it's MS Michigan Man 64. Instagram, same thing, MS Michigan Man 64. Facebook, Brian Wallace out of Brunswick, Ohio. Until the next episode, it's the MS Michigan Man. I am out.